It's been quite a while since the last time I uploaded on this channel. So, whoops, my bad. So here I have a pretty cool app, and it's just a basic chat app. Although the catch is I didn't use socket programming at all. In fact, I took a new look at it entirely. So let me show you an example. So here we have a guy, his name is Nick. Here we have another guy, his name is John. And here we have their girlfriend, and this can be Kaylee or something. And she can be, hey boys. So he sends it, and it appears on all of the screens. John is then like, hey there. Send that, it appears on all of the screens. And then Nick is like, shh, I'm sleeping. And he sends it, and it appears on all of the screens. They also have the option to, if I can maybe resize one of these out there, to clear the chat. So let's say this chat is becoming a bit too full because currently there isn't really a way to delete any messages specifically. That can maybe be for you to implement, but currently there isn't really such a thing to do. So what we can do here is we can say clear chat, and here we'll ask, hey, are you sure you want to clear the chat? It will clear it for everyone. You can say cancel, nothing will happen, but if you say it here and just say confirm, then it will clear the chat and the bot will say all messages were deleted by Kay. So that is the basics of the application. So let me quickly explain to you how we are not using sockets. And we probably don't have to grow you. We can go here. So the idea behind what I am doing right here is, here is the user, right? So this is the user. And here is the database. And here's the other user. So the idea is that when the user enters a message, it sends it to the database. And then both of these check. So both of them check. So the top one here is for checking. So we're going to label it C for checking. So then they check, has the database been changed? If the database has been changed, then this will return all of the data in the database. And this is how I got around using sockets, because instead of using sockets, I just went and told the database to just go for it. Have you changed? And then the database will reply, yeah, I have changed, and send back the data. And that's for all of the clients. So that's how I got around it. Now, if you're still interested in watching this, then nice. Now, what do you need in order to follow along? Well, I would highly recommend you have some JavaScript knowledge, because we will be using React. So I actually recommend you also have React knowledge. If you know React, then you probably know JavaScript as well. But anyways, you need to know this. You probably need to know some CSS. It's not really required. I'm not going to discuss any CSS. You can just copy and paste the source code. And of course some HTML, but that's obvious. Okay, and how are we going to get around using the database? Well, we could probably on our own code and say, hey, database, have you updated? But there's actually a better way to do this. There's a framework called React. Of course there's a framework called React. I meant there's a framework called Meteor. Now, Meteor has this very special feature, and there's a lot of things built into it, but we're going to focus on the most interesting feature, in my opinion. The ability to just update the database without having any trouble. So how will we go about this? So then we'll use Meteor to do all of this, to do the checking and do the updating. And all we have to do is we just have to tell Meteor to send data in and when to receive it. You don't need to know Meteor. This is actually almost an introduction to Meteor as well, because I recently started using it and I realized it's pretty good. Anyhow, I'm going to close this. And then we can go search for Meteor, because we need to install it. So let's go here and we can search for Meteor.js. Just use the JS to make things a little bit less complicated to find, because if you just search Meteor, you're going to find a bunch of pictures of rocks. Okay, so here is what you probably would see is Meteor software. So www.meteor.com. Cool. Now what we want to do is we want to go to tutorials because we need to install Meteor and I actually have no idea how. So let's just go there and get ready. So here's the tutorials. What you want to do is you want to go to this to-do app and you want to say start tutorial and in React. And here we go. So here in the tutorial section at number 1, creating the app, we can do this. This will install Meteor for us. And this is for OS X and Linux. Whilst this one right here, that's for Windows. So you do need npm. So you just Node Package Manager. If you install Node, I do believe it does come. npm does come with Node. I'm not sure, but I do believe that is. And yeah, we can just stop the server here from running because I just showed you the example. Okay, now to install Meteor, you just paste this piece of code in here. If you're not on Linux or Mac, you'll have to use this. But anyways, you just do that. I already have it installed, so I'm not going to execute that because then it's going to be an entire install again, and I don't want that. Okay, and then after you've done that, you can just use Meteor create and then your project name. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to say, so I'm just going to stick here and say Meteor. So remember, this is after I've installed this. So anyways, Meteor create, and we can call this chat app. And we can also resize this just so we don't run out of space here. And we can also just do that. Also, if you are looking to adding accounts here, because currently we don't have any accounts, you just enter your username and you start talking. But if you do want to add accounts, here at number 7 in the tutorial, you can just say Meteor add and then accounts password. That will allow you to create accounts with password, and you have to install bcrypt as well, so the passwords can be encrypted with bcrypt. So if you do want to add accounts, then this is the place to go to because it does explain how to do it. Alright, so here it is. At number 8, so under disable quick prototyping, we can remove this right here because from the start we probably won't be using this. So I'm going to just remove that once all of this is installed, of course. And here at number 9, we also want to remove auto publish. So these are just a few things that you can keep in mind. So we want to remove insecure and auto publish. Also, the code for all of this is in the description. It's on GitHub. You can just go get it. So if you are struggling to follow along, you can go and copy and paste the code. I do highly recommend doing that with the CSS because I won't be covering CSS because it's pretty boring, especially if you have to watch me type it out. And there we go. It has been completed. So we can just cd into chat app. And if you want to have a visualization of what actually happened, I can actually open up my file manager here. So we just created a folder here in my code folder called chat app, and inside of here it created a Meteor project, as you can see right here. Now we want to open up VS Code here as well, so we can say code and then dot, and this will open up VS Code, or you can just drag and drop the folder into VS Code. Now we want to remove what I said we were going to, so we get that Meteor remove insecure. If you wanted to, you can now use the VS Code terminal, so you can just go to terminal, new terminal. And in here we can just paste Meteor remove insecure. And we also want to remove auto publish. Now insecure and auto publish is just something that makes it kind of easier to start off with projects, but you have to remove them later on. I removed it from the start because then I don't have to change any code later on, because you do have to change a bit of code once you remove some of it. Okay, and then we can just say Meteor remove auto publish. Alright, so once that has been removed, I want you to make sure everything is installed because it does occasionally happen that Meteor doesn't actually install the dependencies it needs. So to do that, you can say Meteor npm and I. Whenever you do anything with npm in Meteor, you have to say Meteor first. Otherwise, it won't work with the project because we use Meteor to run and Meteor needs to install npm for itself. Alright, so if everything works fine, then you can just say Meteor and that will start the project. We can then bring the terminal down because we won't be using it for a while. And right now we can actually go here to client, and in main.css, you can remove anything that is in here because we won't be using it. And you can paste the CSS code provided on GitHub. Anyhow, you can save that file and we don't have to open this main.css file ever again. So let's talk about the file structure. What's going on here? So we won't be using the tests folder. You don't even have to worry about it. I don't know if you can delete it though, but you probably can. The server is, of course, the server is the backend. Currently, there is a few things in here. We can delete all of this. Also, we will be using MongoDB. If you don't know any MongoDB, it's perfectly fine. Anyhow, you can delete all of the things in main.js because there's nothing that has to run at the moment. There's just node modules that comes with, node. Then in imports, this is where basically everything's going to get done. We have our API to communicate with the database, and we have our UI to create the user interface. And in client, basically any client-side thing. So here's the main.html, which gets plugged in by the main.jsx. So everything goes into the main.jsx, and then the main.jsx compiles into the main.html here. To follow along, I would recommend, it's not required, but I would recommend that you have no SQL booster. I believe it is on all platforms, but I do recommend you have it because it will become very useful as soon as we start working with the database and we want to see the data going into the database. But it is optional, it's just a way to visualize what is inside of the database. Alright, so once you see app running at and then localhost 3000, you can go into your browser and just say localhost 3000. And you should see this. You have a click me, and that's about all there is. Here should be links, but because I cleared out the server, it didn't actually publish any of the data to the database because I didn't need it to. But so you can just click here, and so that's pretty cool. Now I can delete everything in here. We do not need to use the app anymore. So first I want to be able to create the header because we're going to do a bit of designing first. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here and I'm going to just delete what is not required, which means hello.jsx and info.jsx can be deleted. So you can select them both and just say delete. So first, what I usually like to do is I like to create my app inside of here. So I'm going to start by creating the header here. So I'm going to say header. And inside of this header, I want to have an h1. And this will just keep the title of the web page or the application. And for some weird reason, last night when I worked on the app, I decided I'm going to call it Chat Margarito. Don't ask me why, I just know I did. Save it, and you should see it refresh here and say that. And there you go, Chat Margarito. Also here in main.html, I would like to change something here. Instead of chat app, we can actually call it this as well. So just to change the title. Save that, and boom. And that should update as well. If it doesn't update, you can just press refresh here, but usually it will hot reload. Cool. Now here with header, I want to give it an ID, which has a bunch of styling already added to it. So we can just say ID is equal to site header. Save that, and you should see a beautiful header appear right here. It may not look like much, but it is actually a header. We can put this into its own component because maybe you want to modify it a little bit later so you have a larger header and maybe it goes across the entire site or something. So what I'm going to do is here in UI, I'll say new file and call it header.jsx. Now inside of header.jsx, you can create a basic functional React component, and you can just call it header. It doesn't need to take in any props unless you want to give it props. And for what's inside of the header, we can just cut everything here and put it inside of the header. And there we go. Save that. And here we can hopefully just say header and VS Code will import it for us. Save that and everything should still look relatively the same. Next, I want to create a form where the messages will be typed into, including the username, and be sent off. So let's go here underneath the header and we can create a form with the ID of message form. Doesn't need any action to be taken here. And now inside of this form, we want an input of type text with an ID of username. It doesn't need any name here, although we can give it a placeholder. And in fact, I believe I'll just go with my previous setup, stretch this out here and stretch this out here. I think that will be a bit better. Placeholder, and we can just say username because we won't have anything else to indicate that the username should be there. Although it's up to you, you can change the design however you want. Also here we want to give it a max length. This is also optional, but I do recommend it just so you don't have someone with like a name of 20 characters, and we can just make that 5. And also we want to say autocomplete should be off, so we don't want autocomplete to do anything. Perfect. You can then copy this and paste it. Here we'll do the same thing, but now here we'll say message, because this will be the message that they sent. Its ID will be message. Its max length, yet again, it's just optional, but I would recommend keeping it to 200. And yeah, save that. And we should already see, yeah, not too bad here. We also want another input here. So input, this could also be a button, but I preferred using an input. And this will be an input of type submit. And its value will be send. It'll also have the ID of send message. Now to add some extra styling, I would actually like to go here to the div and just give it an ID of app. This will also just style the background and everything just to make it look a little bit nicer. Now if we were to go back here, and as you can see, it looks much better already. We have our title there, we have our username, our message, and we can send it. If you don't like anything here, you can change it. It's up to you. Perfect. Now that we have the message form out of the way, we can actually insert it into its own component. Because we are using React, so it just makes sense to make a bunch of components. And here I can just say message form.jsx. We can create a basic functional component, and we can say message form. In here, we don't want to take in anything just yet, and here we want to paste the form. We can copy the form or cut it, and we can go to message form and just paste it here. Perfect. Save that, and we can copy message form, or actually we can just copy this right here and replace header with message form. Then copy that, and we can put message form here. Save that, and your page should still look the same afterwards. Next up, we'll be focusing on the message box. So that was the white box all the messages appeared in. That was its own component as well. So we can create a div, and this div can be of ID messages box. And inside of this, then right here, we can create a div with the class name message. And in here, there should be a p tag. And inside of the p tag, there should be a span, or actually 2 spans. So it should look something like this. Now, for right now, I'll just say username because we don't have a username. And here I'll say, hello, this is my message because we don't have a message yet either. and that semicolon can go outside of the span, and we can add a space right there as well. Then the first span will have a class name of username, and the second span will also have a class name of message text. Save that and let's see what we get. We get this. So it's username and then hello, this is my message. Now later on I'm going to call this a lot of times. So what would make this easier is if this was a component. So I'm going to move this right here, just this message, into its own component. So we can say new file, and we can say message.jsx. Of course, this yet again is optional because you don't necessarily need it. I'm then going to go here to app.jsx, and I'm going to cut this right here. Instead of message, I'm going to create a basic React functional component, and I'm going to call it message. And it's going to take in two things. It's going to take in the username and also the message. And in here we can just paste. And here where it says username, we can now do this. And you can put the username in here. And in here where it prints out the message, we can just say message. And boom, there we go. We have our message component. Now back here in app.jsx, we can import that message component, or let's move this message box into its own component as well, because that will have enough code to actually create its own component. So let's go and call this messages.jsx. So messages, because messages will be put in here. You can also call it message box or something that you will remember and understand. We can then cut this, and right here we can create a React functional component. And then here we can say messages, and it won't take any props, and we can just replace this with this div. Save it, and in here we can just import messages. So messages, and here we just specify messages, as you can see right there. And you will see something like this without a username or anything like that. And then here instead of messages, I'm actually going to copy this one right here, and I'm going to paste it here, and then we can have message. Right here we can then call message. Just to see that it works, we can give it a username equal to, and let's say Nick, and then also message equal to, and let's say hello world. Perfect. And underneath that, just for some extra styling, I want to say give it an HR, so horizontal line, and then an H6 tag with the ID of end. And this can just say in capital letters end. So once they've scrolled all the way to the end, they will see this line at end, and they will know that is where the messages all started from. And let's see, there we go. And that is for the most part where everything is going to go. One last thing before we start working on the backend is underneath messages, we can create a div with the class name of center. And inside of the div, we want a button with the ID of clear chat btn. And boom, you should see something like this. We can just say clear chatting, the button, and boom. And there we go, there's the clear chat button. Now we can start working on making everything actually work. So first, let's set up the database. So I'm going to go to imports. You can actually close clients here. I'm going to go to imports, we can also close server, and create a new folder called DB for database. We're going to define our database in here. And if you have multiple databases, then you can define all of your databases in here. I'm going to call it messages collection.js. and it will import Meteor from, and these are some of the packages Meteor provides. So Meteor, and there we go. So now we import a Meteor from Meteor. I'm also going to close some of these until we open them up again, just to save a little bit of resources here. And in here we can just say export const messages collection, and we can just make that equal to new mongo dot collection. And inside of that we want to create a new collection. In this case I'm just going to call it messages, but whatever you want to call it you can. I'm just calling messages because that's where all the messages will come in. Now how will the database look while we're at it? Well, we'll have an underscore ID, of course, so underscore ID, but that will be provided for us. We'll also have the username, and this will be the user who sent it. So maybe you could filter by username, give that functionality if you wanted to. Or maybe if people sign in, then this could possibly link them because of the username, unless you want to link it in a different way. We also want the message, and then the sent at. So the sent at is just basically when the message has been sent, because we want the first message that has been sent to be at the bottom and the last to be at the top. Perfect. So that's how it's going to look. We can leave that as a comment here. And my bad, this should be Mongo. That is why I was getting a little bit confused here, because yeah, so that's why we can use Mongo here. Save it, and now you basically have the collection. Next, we want to be able to use publish. So to publish some functionality to the database, and that will happen inside of API. We can say create a new file, and we can call it messages publication. And publication is basically something special to Meteor, I believe. So publications allows the data to be published from the server to the client. And later on we'll be working with subscribe as well, which allows the client to ask for data. So we can close this messages collection, and we can also delete this links.js. I'm going to delete that. Alright, then here we can import, and this time for real, Meteor, and then from Meteor, and we just say from, and we're good to go. We also want to import our messages collection, so I'm just going to paste that there because that's a lot of typing. So we're going to get our messages collection, and it's going to import from the root directory of the project. Meteor will allow you to import from the root directory of the project and not from the operating system. That's also another place where Meteor does come in handy, because in /imports, that is right here, the root directory of the project, and then imports, and then db, and then messages collection. So we'll be importing messages collection from there, and then we can say Meteor dot publish and messages. So this is the collection we want to publish or to get publications from, and we want to give it a function, and it can be called publish messages. And in here we can just return messages collection dot find. So it just finds the data and then it sends it back. So this will basically search the database and just get everything. And next up we want to do the methods. Now the methods are things like sending a message or clearing all the messages. If you want to delete a message, you'll have to put it inside of the methods. And it's fairly simple. So we can just go to API again, new file, and just say messages methods.js. And then for the imports, I'm just going to copy and paste again. So we're importing check from Meteor check, and this is just to check if something is a specific data type. And you're also getting the collection. So you can also do this. If you don't want to go slash and then import slash, then you can also do dot slash db, because then it will be inside of API, and then dot slash it will be inside of imports, and you can go to db. So it's up to you how you like to import your stuff. We can then say Meteor dot methods, and this will allow us to define methods, and we can define an object. So here we can then say messages.send, and this will be the method to send data to the database. And we get the username and the text that should be sent to the database. Then inside of here, we want to check that the text is indeed a string, just like that. And we also want to check that the username is a string. This check is optional, but I do recommend it just because we can use it. And why not have the extra validation beforehand as well? And then we can say message collection dot insert, and then we want to insert the data message, and inside of here there should be text. We also want to be sent at to be a new date, and then username to be username. So you can leave it like that, or you can also say username, but ES6 will allow you to just say username if you just want to keep both of them username. So yeah, now we can send the messages. We also want to add the clear method, so we can clear the messages. So here we can go here and say messages.clear, and in here we don't really want to take anything, so we can just leave that empty. And it's going to go to messages collection, and it's going to say .remove, and we're just going to pass in an empty thing to remove everything. So clear will basically delete the data from the database. Save that, and now we can send the messages and clear them as well. We can close that because we won't have to open that again. Same with this, we won't have to open that again either. Now, it's all good and all that we have the ability to delete all our messages and send all our messages and get the data from the database, but currently we can't. The front end cannot communicate with the backend yet. So inside of the server and then inside of main.js, we want to throw these two imports. You don't have to do anything, you just have to import them. And once you've imported them, this will tell the server that, hey, we have new things here, and it will allow us to use all of that in the front end. At this point, I do recommend you do restart your server, which I believe it should be on my terminal here. So let's get a new terminal there, and we can close this terminal. And ooh, we're getting a crash. Why are we getting a crash? Collection of undefined in messengers collection. Maybe here we go. I said Meteor because I thought this was Meteor, but this is Meteor.mongo because we're getting Mongo. You'll notice that like with check, we go Meteor/check. With Meteor, we go Meteor/Meteor. With Mongo, we go Meteor/Mongo. Okay, and if you save that, you shouldn't be receiving any crashes, and we're receiving another crash. What's the problem here? Media stream error not defined. Where did I say that? Messages method. Media stream error. Okay, I see. Well, that right there, that should be Mongo. The reason we don't have to import Mongo is because it will already be provided to us by the server. And I'll explain that in a second. So Mongo. Okay, there we go. Now we can save that, we shouldn't get a problem. So this server basically imports both of these. So messages methods, which is right there, and messages publication. And because it's being served by Meteor, why did I say Mongo? This should be Meteor. And because it's being served by Meteor, it will already know it should check for Meteor here. And it will know, oh, Meteor methods, and it can add it right there. So let's see, any more crashes? And no, our crashes has been removed. Great, so now we have Meteor methods and everything just works. Now we can restart the server. So we can quit out of it by pressing Ctrl and C and just run Meteor again. This will just make sure that the server does know that new things have been imported and everything works. Usually if you do mess with the server, the API or the DB, I do recommend a quick restart. Okay, so while we wait, we can start working on the app. So here after JSX, we can create some of the base functions that we'll be using. And there you go, it's running. Your application should still work perfectly fine after a quick refresh. And there we go, everything still works like it should. Okay, now outside of this, we want to do a few things. So first I want to import useState because we will be using that later. So use state. And in here, I want to be able to send a message. So I'm going to create a function for that. Send message. And I want this to take in the username and the text that should be passed in. And here we can just say Meteor. And yet again, Meteor knows that it's Meteor because it's being run by Meteor. So once it sees Meteor, it already knows what to do. You can just hit .call, and this is to call the methods we just created. So in this case, we want to call messages.send. And we also want to pass in the username and the text. Don't know where that's coming from. It's coming from messengers methods. So right here, messengers.send username text. That's where it's coming from. It's going to pass in the username and text and going to do this. So add the messengers to the database. Perfect. Now I'm going to just slip this down and also go like this. Actually, that probably doesn't matter. Then here, I also want to add functionality to clear the chat. So we can say function clear chat. Now we want to say who cleared the chat. So we're going to pass in the username of the person who cleared the chat. Then here we can say const clear, and it's going to give us a pop-up to ask us, are you sure you want to clear everything? Because it's not going to be a very fun experience. Now that's quite a lot of typing, so I'm just going to do that. So it's just a confirm, which is basically an alert that says yes or no and returns true or false. It's like warning, this will delete all the messages for you and everyone in the chat. Continue, and then you can say yes or no. We can then say if clear. So if they said yes, then we want to say meteor.call, and we want to say messages.clear. And that will clear the messages. But then you want the bot to basically say, hey, someone cleared the messages. So it can be like a basic bot or mod that's doing things. So in case you might want to work on that a little bit later as well. Anyways, here with username, we can just say bot. And here we can create some strings and say all messages were deleted by, and they want to specify the user who did it. So we can say $, and in here we can say username. Perfect. You can maybe even give a pop-up, so if one person wants to clear everything, then maybe it can ask multiple people, hey, do you want to clear the messages? And then if everyone says yes, then it can clear the messages. Or maybe only admins. Maybe you can create some sign-up page and only the people who created the room have the ability to clear it. It's up to you. Alright, so after that, we do have the messengers to clear the chat and to send messages. Now, right here, we want to go like this, and we want to just say return. Cool. So now we can put some things inside of the app here, because we need to use state. So use state, or should I say use state. And now here I can say messages or message text, and also set message. And here we can just make it empty by default, and I want to make that a capital M. I'm going to copy that and paste it. Underneath it, I'm going to say username, and here I'm going to say username. And if you want to give everyone a default username, such as anonymous or anon or whatnot, you can put it inside of there. And yeah, then that will be their default username. And now we want to also add the ability to, when they press send, what should happen. So you can create a function, and it can be called on message send handler. So this will be the send handler. And we'll take in the event, and we can say e.prevent default, because we don't want the page to reload. We can then also go if username.trim is equal to nothing. So basically, if the username is when it's trimmed, which means if all of the white space is removed, is equal to an empty string, then we want to alert that there's still a username that's required. So username is required. This is an optional thing. Maybe you don't want people to need to put in a username, but I would recommend so, because then everyone knows who everyone is. You can maybe even force the user, so once they enter a username, they're stuck with that username for like 10 minutes or something. That could also be pretty cool. Anyhow, I'm going to copy this if statement, and I'm going to say else, and here I'm just going to say instead of username, message text, so they can't send empty text. And then we can just also say return, because we don't want the function to continue. and here say message is required. Then if that if statement didn't execute, it means everything was fine. Then you can send the message, and we can just pass in the username and the message, and that will send the message. We also want to set the user's message that they have typed in, because it will always be kind of backed up to this use state right here. So we want to set that. So set message text to nothing. We want to clear that. Perfect. So we added a lot of functionality here. Now let's actually add even more functionality. So let's start with this clear button. So yeah, I believe we can just go to the button here and say one click. So if the button has been clicked, then we want to call clear, and here you can just also pass in the username. You can also do this check maybe to check if there's a username inside of the clear here, but that is optional, but you can, it is definitely doable. So if you wanted to, you can probably paste it in here, or maybe even before the warning, then they know. Okay, cool. Now that should actually allow us to already clear the chat. Not that there's much to clear, but we should be able to just clean everything, and this will actually also create the database. So once we click here, it will create the database for us. So if we want to, we can now go to our Mongo or NoSQL booster, and we should be able to see, or wait, you shouldn't be able to see it, but if we say clear chat, then it will create a database for us. Username is required. Bit of random username there. Say clear. Username is still required. Oh yeah, because we haven't updated it yet. It's fine. So yeah, before we do that, we need to be able to add a username. So let's go here and just say username by default is just something random. We can say clear chat, and here we'll ask, are we sure? Say cancel, nothing happened. Clear chat, say okay, and boom. That should probably have cleared it. We don't really have an output to make sure it did. So now we can open up NoSQL Booster to see if we have the database. You should see something similar to this, so Meteor, and we already have two collections here, users and messages. Users is provided by Meteor, so you don't have to worry about that, and messages is basically the messages we sent. So let's see, do we have a message here? And yes, we do. The message, all messages were deleted by SDSD, and the username is bot. Perfect. So the database does exist, and we can actually successfully send the data to the database. Now the only problem is to display that data and to be able to send it again. So let's work on messages here. So we can go to messages right here, and here's where the fun begins. So here we can just import and then use tracker from Meteor and then React Meteor data. Use tracker is basically what is going to allow us to get the data from the database as soon as the database has been changed. This is what we were talking about the entire time, and Meteor gives us that functionality right out of the box. We just need to use tracker, and then it will automatically check, does the database change right now? Did it change? Yes, it did. Refresh. So that's why use tracker is important here. And since we will be working with the database, we do need to import messages collection from import db messages collection. So just there, just so we know that we are working with the database. And inside of here, we can use our use tracker, so const, and we want to get the messages that was sent, so we can display them, as well as the is loading. So if it is still loading, that is equal to a use tracker, and this use tracker has a function inside of it, an arrow function, and here is basically what will happen. So when the database updates, this will be sent in. So we can go and say const no data available, and this will basically mean if there is no data that has been sent back, and this is by default, it is an empty messages, I almost want to say dictionary, but it's an object. So messages, and then we can just make it an empty array, because we will be receiving an array for messages, because there's a lot of messages that will be retrieved. Okay, and then after that we can create a handler, so const handler is equal to meteor.subscribe, and as I said before, subscribe it, so we can ask for data to the front end or the client side. And we can just say subscribe, and we can subscribe to messages. And this is just a table we have created, or a collection that we have created. Just like with publish, where we had to subscribe to the messages collection, the same goes for the subscribe here. Okay, so if the handler is not ready, so not handler.ready, that means we're still loading the data. So we want to return, and we want to return ... no data available, so we want to spread out. And we also want to return is loading true, because then it is still loading. Cool, but if the handler is ready, which means all the data has been sent or can be sent back to us, then we want to execute a little function here. I'm just going to paste it there because it's quite a long thing to type. So we're getting the messages. We're saying messages collection does find, and then we're not filtering or anything like that, and then we're sorting, and we just say .fetch. It just returns all of the messages, everything inside of that collection. You could maybe filter it, so maybe you have multiple rooms and you only want to use one collection, then you could probably filter by room. Or maybe if you want to filter like by user, like let's say you have a filter button, then you could also filter by the username or whatnot. And after that, we can just copy this, that return there, and we can paste it here. And now we can paste messages in here instead of no data available, and we can make this false. The reason why this is inside of an object mostly is just for in case you want to add more things here, because this use tracker can become quite big sometimes. Now that we have all of this, we can actually check if it is loading. So let's go here and say is loading. So if it is loading, then we just want to return some loading. So I'm going to go here and say in h2 with a class name of loading, and inside of here we can just say loading messages. Perfect. And now after that we can say else, and we can just throw all of that in here. So I'm going to use some brackets here, and then just some fragmentation, paste that in here. Right, and now we can map through all of the messages. So here we can create another JavaScript procedure and say message.map, because we want to map through all of the messages we have received, and we want to pass in we want to get a message from it. So we get the message, and in return we basically receive this, and we can say message.username here. Of course, you could have destructured it here so it says username instead of message, but I prefer just to do this. And we can also say messages or message.message. Okay, and that should give us all of the messages. So let's see, what do we get? I'm wondering. Nothing happened, right? Okay, here we go. It just took a while to reload. So let's see, it loads the messages for a brief moment, and it should not be taking so long to load the messages. Let's go see. Could it be some of my code? Or let's open up the console here so we can see if anything goes wrong. Don't see anything here. Don't see anything here. So let's see. Well, probably not the reason, but we also need to provide a key here. So key is equal to, and we can just say message._id. Let's also try to maybe reload the page manually, just to make sure that it's not a small bug maybe. And we're still just receiving loading messages. You know what? My database is called message and not messages. That is my fault probably. So let's see. Here we have messages.send and stuff. And here we also have messages. And here with publications, it's saying message instead of messages. And that's probably what was causing this loading to continue forever, because we were trying to query something that did not quite exist, because you need to publish in order to subscribe. Refresh. Oh, and we get an error. Message.map. Yeah, that makes sense, because that should be messages.map and not message. Save that, and now if we reload, loading messages for a brief moment, and there we go. We have a bot and the message that it has sent. Cool. So now we are actually seeing data from the database. Now we need to be able to send data to the database. which means we now have to go to the message form and do a few things here. So there's not too much we have to do here. We just need to actually import a few things. So let's get on message send handler, as well as username and set username. And I can't type, that should be set, and that should be username. And then we also need message text and set message text. Cool. Now we need to do a few things. So on the submit of this form, we want to call this on message send handler. So I'm going to say on submit, and I'm just going to paste that in there. Perfect. Now we can send data to the database. Now with both of these, we want to have an on change event, and the on change should call its set counterpart. I'm going to go set message text here, and we can just say message text. I'm going to fix that top one in a second, and you'll see in a second why I say this. And then we can go set username, and here we can pass in username. Or my bad, we should not say username or message text, we should say e.target.value. My bad. And here we can just take in e from both of these. And then also we want in value, and this value will be equal to its set. So in this case, message text and username. Cool. So let's just, maybe if you want to, we can do this to make it a little bit easier on the eyes to see what's actually going on here. So I just did it with one of them because it's kind of a lot of effort. So we have a type of text, we have a placeholder, we have an ID, we have a max length, we have autocomplete. Then we set our value to the username right here. And on the on change, it takes in an event. So once we type a key, and it passes in that event to set username. And then set username then changes username, and then the value changes to username, and it just continues. So that's pretty cool. We should now be able to actually have it work. So let's go here. I can be called Mike, and hello there, send. And whoops, we are not sending in this data, my bad. It gets the data, but it has nothing to do with it because we didn't send it in. Okay, so here with app.jsx, here in message form, we can just pass in all of the things I should. I'm going to paste it in because there's a lot of typing. So we send in the on message handler, the username, the message text, and the set username and set message text. Okay, save that, and now if we were to go back to our normal home page here. Okay, and now let's call myself Nick. Hello there, send. And there we go. We get our hello there. Although there's one problem. This hello there is at the bottom. And we actually want this hello there to be at the top. So we need to swap these two. So in order to do that, we can just go to messengers.jsx, and yet our send at is saying -1. Let's quickly change that into a 1 and see what happens. Our data stays the same. It could be possible that our send at wasn't properly added. So let's go and check inside of our methods. And here we go. I said send at, and it should be sent at. Okay, there we go. That should fix our problem. I'm going to clear the chat. So I'm going to say okay. And I think MongoDB is currently refreshing, so it's probably not going to work at the moment. While we wait, we can also go to message form, and I'm going to remove this default value, or app.jsx. I'm going to remove that default value right here. I don't want that there anymore. Okay, and there we go. All messages deleted by SDSD. Okay, let's go, Nick. Show me what you got. And there we go. There's Nick sending his data. Okay, so let's duplicate this tab or open it in a different browser. It's up to you. You'll get the same effect. Here we go. We can just resize this guy. Okay, and this can be Jack. Let's say, hey, Jack. Sends a message, and Jack says, hey. Now Nick goes and says, oh, wow. Send that data, and there we go. So that is how you can create a chat app without using any sockets. Because we just used Meteor, and Meteor just updated everything once we send data to the database and the database changes. So this is the power of Meteor. I hope you enjoyed and will maybe even take some liking to it and learn it yourself. And yeah, I'll see you all again in the next video.